I think all of us have to do some soul searching to figure out how does something like this happen. And that means that we examine the laws and the context for what happened, as well as the specifics of the incident. But my main message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon. I don't know, not having been there and not seeing all the facts, what role race played in that. But I think it's fair to say, number one, any of us would be pretty angry. Number two, that the Cambridge police acted stupidly.
There you go. Of course, he was a little more careful with his remarks this time around. Welcome back. Joining us now is Ben Shapiro, editor-in-chief of Truth Revolt, editor-at-large, Breitbart News, and a New York Times best-selling author of The People versus Barack Obama. Hey, Ben, welcome back, sir.
Hey, how are you?
I'm all right. Okay, you wrote a great piece talking about it at Breitbart.com, talking about how the Obama administration has thrown gas on the situation in Ferguson. I couldn't agree more. And you talk about not only Obama, but the Attorney General, and good talk about all that.
Well, there's no question that the Obama administration continues to throw gas on the flames. President Obama just 2 days ago in his press conference again suggested a certain moral equivalence between the cops and the rioters. And he continues to put out the suggestion that we know now that this was a race-based incident, or that there's something deeply racial going on in Ferguson, Missouri, from the police department. He's sending Eric Holder there, presumably because the local authorities can't be trusted. Eric Holder himself wrote an op-ed today in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch making exactly that argument, that he's there to save the day, and he can stop all of these racist local authorities from taking advantage of the situation. And then, of course, you have the Holder Justice Department, which actually worked against the local authorities' release of the tape of Michael Brown participating in a strong-arm robbery just slightly before Michael Brown was shot. The Obama administration seems to have a vested agenda in the continuation of the belief that is so prominent in the black community, unfortunately, that law enforcement and the justice system are wildly biased against black folks. And the more that that belief is pushed and forwarded, especially by people in power, the more of these riots you're going to get.
No, I couldn't agree more, and of course not to mention the third autopsy, which was very unorthodox. I don't know if it's unprecedented at the time that it happened, when there had already been two other autopsies. And I'm a little bit confused. I mean, I know they're doing a federal investigation, but I mean, are they doing a civil rights investigation now? Because I mean, you know, there's a chance he'll be tried in a court for his actions. You can't try him for civil rights violations, you know, while that's going on. So why the rush here to get all this done now when they didn't even do it for Trayvon Martin?
Well, they actually did do it for Trayvon Martin, meaning the DOJ sent somebody down there, and they did a full civil rights investigation. Basically, as the acquittal was taking place, they had a long-standing federal investigation going, and they ratcheted it up after George Zimmerman was acquitted.
Okay, I knew they sent people down there to quote-unquote organize, or wound up organizing and some say rabble-rousing the protesters, but I didn't know that they were conducting their civil rights investigation at that time.
Yeah, that's right, and they're doing it now again. Every time there are riots, every time there are protests, that means that it's time for the Obama DOJ Civil Rights Division to jumk into action. The Obama DOJ Civil Rights Division is one of the worst civil rights divisions in the history of the country. I mean, it's a civil rights division that suggests, for example, that the new Black Panthers do not need to be prosecuted, but that we have to enable that entire branch to go down to Florida to make sure that George Zimmerman wasn't participating in some sort of race-based killing. Same thing here. By the way, we have yet to see any evidence whatsoever that there was any sort of racial profiling or racially motivated killing done here at all. But that doesn't stop the media from speculating. It certainly doesn't stop the Obama administration from putting that implication out there. And again, all of this really comes down to what we're watching is the black community believes, and the polls show it, the black community believes by a huge margin that the Justice Department is rigged against black folks. And that means that whenever there's a situation, white cop, black person shot, that means that they immediately leap to the conclusion that it must be some sort of racial incident in which law enforcement is targeting black folks again.
Yeah, and this is all, and let's go to the administration, whatever you want, the Justice Department, or even the media here, maybe especially the media. Gateway Pundit came out yesterday with a story with actual kind of an MRI or an X-ray of an eye socket that had been broken. The bone was broken in 2 places, saying that that's what happened to the officer. You never hear about that. You rarely hear about the gun, the battle for the gun that the officer says had gone off. You never really get the cop side of the story, except for that one time they played that tape from the St. Louis Dana Lowe's show. And it's as if, well, we have 3 witnesses here who said he had his hands up and said, please don't shoot, and that's going to be our narrative.
Well, that is the entire narrative, and that's what the media has pushed. First, they pushed the gentle giant narrative that Michael Brown was just Mother Teresa, just big, and that turned out not to be true when he was strong-arm robbing a place 5 minutes before he got shot. But beyond that, the narrative that was pushed from the beginning, the hands up, don't shoot routine, that was pushed by a guy named Dorian Johnson. Dorian Johnson was Michael Brown's accomplice in the actual strong-arm robbery. And he said in that same testimony that Michael Brown was pulled into the car by the cop because the cop just wanted to beat him up, and that he was then shot in the back. Well, the autopsy shows that he was not shot in the back. All 3 of the witnesses, all 3 of them who claimed that Michael Brown was raising his hands, also claimed that Michael Brown was shot in the back. That was certainly not true. The autopsy shows that it was not true, and yet we're still hearing the same narrative put out there. Hey, look, the story that is put out by Dorian Johnson and some of these other witnesses is wildly implausible. Does that mean that it's impossible for it to have happened? No, it doesn't. But to suggest, as Governor Jay Nixon in Missouri now has, the prosecution should go forward, the question is based on what? And this just demonstrates once again that social justice is the absolute and complete opposite of actual justice. When people are saying, let's prosecute this guy because we need social justice, well, where's the evidence that he actually should be prosecuted?
Right.
Why is it that we are now putting all these social ills of the country upon the back of one guy? It really is despicable.
And you got Nixon saying, calling for vigorous prosecution, for justice for the family. And you got also Ron Johnson, the head of the patrolmen's, the State Highway Patrol, who was put in charge, speaking at the church over the weekend, basically saying he's ashamed to wear the uniform and apologizing, not offering condolences, but apologizing for what the officer did to Michael Brown.
And all this happens really because nobody will get up and say the reality of the situation, which is rioting is not justified. By the way, protests are not justified until this process has completely taken place. And everybody just needs to cool down until we let the due process of law take place. The system is not biased against black folks. The idea that officers were just driving around a 66% black city looking for black people to target is completely unproved by any amount of evidence whatsoever. And everybody needs to cool down until we allow the process to go forward. Unfortunately, there are a lot of folks who make hay out of this situation, including the Obama administration, which is hoping to jazz up the black vote prior to the 2014 election.
And of course, the call for the prosecutor in this case to step down, that's the new cry. So, if this case is presented, and now we're learning there won't be a decision made by this grand jury till October, which is, a month and a half away. But if it's presented and the governor reportedly has asked for him to step down and recuse himself. And I mean, he told the governor to man up. He's not stepping down. So in the eyes of the media and in the eyes of the representatives, if you will, of the black community, if this goes forward with him as the prosecutor, it doesn't count really because it's tainted in the first place.
Well, that's right. Well, it's tainted anyway. And no matter what happens here, so long as this officer does not end up on death row, there's going to be a perception that it was tainted because the facts are completely irrelevant to the situation. And the proof is in the pudding, that the facts are irrelevant to the situation. And this is really just about widespread hatred and discontent for the justice community. The reality is this. Yesterday, there's another black man shot on the streets of St. Louis because he was attacking an officer with a knife.
Right.
There were protesters anyway. People protested the police in St. Louis, and they were chanting. What were they chanting? Hands up, don't shoot. That wasn't even the situation. That wasn't even alleged to be the situation. In this case, you had a schizophrenic who attacked a cop with a knife, and he got shot for his trouble. And you still had people protesting and suggesting that it was a racially based incident. This is not about reality. This is about a perception of reality that at this point in time is completely unjustified.
Ben, Jesse Jackson told me yesterday on this show, I presented the police explanation for what happened as it's been reported, and he said, he accused me of making up the facts or presenting the worst case scenario. So I said, this is what the cop is claiming reportedly. I said, is there any circumstance that you could see where the shooting would be justified? He said, do you? I said, yeah. If what the cop said is true, yeah. I said, do you? Are there any circumstances? He said, no. Now, that is insane.
That's the point. The facts are irrelevant. It doesn't matter what happened. All that matters is that there was a white cop and a black guy who got shot, and the black guy didn't have a gun on him, and therefore that means that this is just another point in the grand racial score against America that the left really wants to draw up here.
Ben, great talking to you, sir. Thanks for coming on.
You too. Be well.
Bye-bye. Editor-in-Chief of Truth Revolt, editor-at-large Breitbart News, and New York Times best-selling author Ben Shapiro, the book The People versus Barack Obama. It is scary. It is scary because, you know, the politics involved, the racial politics and the media. I mean, look what happened after George Zimmerman was acquitted. Look what happened after he was acquitted in a trial with minorities on the jury. The media went nuts. Racism, right? I mean, you know, what are you going to do here? I just hope this cop gets justice. I really do. And Bernie Kerik doesn't think he's going to get justice. All right, folks, we'll come back. Give Me Five is next on the Steve Malzberg Show.